Um, Thanks very much for subscribing or paying an interest in this little postback tool. This is really a beginner's guide, like a beyond beginner's guide of how to actually build something that you want. And it's never been a better time to build stuff. Like it is crazy what you can do. I'm not a coder, so the first disclaimer is this is really like a no coders beginner's guide to actually building something on AI, getting it built, made, deployed out in the real world, and hopefully, thanks to people like your good self, using it and getting some value from it. So, the theme of this is really kind of like teach an old dog new tricks or just build something today, really. That's really the idea. So, we've got all these tools with AI at the moment where you can link ChatGPT to various things, which we'll come on to. But what you should be really trying to do, and I've been really inspired by Greg Eisenberg and his podcast, where he talks about solving a boring but important problem. So it's like a micro niche. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're in the affiliate industry and postbacks are kind of boring. We'll get into that. But for you, think of it not just as postbacks, but think about something that actually, that the purpose of this video is to really hopefully inspire you to build something that you want to build. So you've got a niche, something that you understand, your industry, right? And there's a micro niche. So there's a pain point that someone is dealing with that is a boring problem. So what we can do now with AI is actually build a tool and test it. You can test to see whether you can solve that problem. Worst case scenario, you learn. Next best scenario is you help someone, and hopefully you may produce something that grows. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to produce something that grows. This is kind of first out the bat, but you can kind of build it, share the whole progress with people, hopefully, what this is, and start to kind of, yeah, get into it. So, before we actually get into the AI, really got to think about the kind of fundamentals of marketing, right? You need like that attention, interest, desire, and action. So, the attention is really like your audience, right? If you're on LinkedIn or Instagram or X or Reddit or wherever you are, you can basically build an audience and get a sense of what your ideal customer profile looks like for the problem that you're trying to solve. And that will then pique someone's interest, right? And with that comes the desire in the sense that, oh, now I know that this solution to my problem is there. We now call for action and get them to sign up or do something or whatever. So within our industry, the affiliate industry, a big problem, I think, is that postbacks are boring, right? Postbacks, no one really understands, or a lot of people don't understand actually how a postback works. And I was in that boat as well. I think I said in my initial post, I managed a whole team of people and it was a nightmare. It was a total nightmare because I didn't really understand how postbacks works. So let's just get into the whole idea of demystifying that. And if nothing else, maybe you'll get away with two things from this video. One, to inspire you to build your own product, and two, to maybe understand really what a postback does. So a postback is basically where you take a final landing page or a destination URL. So let's think of it as a site, your site that you want to send traffic to, and you put it into a tracking platform. And there's tons of tracking platforms out there like Cake, Tune, Volume, Aphice, Trackia, Everflow, and then loads and loads within certain niches like Income Access and yeah, My Affiliates, NetRefer. There's tons and tons of them. They all mainly do the same thing. And if they work with postbacks, they work this way. The system takes a final landing page or a destination URL and turns it into a tracking link. Now, you can create that tracking link and then you give it to an affiliate. And basically, usually the components of that tracking link include something like an offer ID and an affiliate ID. And when a user clicks on that tracking link, basically they hit the server of that tracking company, of the software. And what happens is you generate something called a transaction ID or a click ID, sometimes it's usually called. This gets carried through just like a UTM parameter to that final landing page, and a postback sits on that landing page or any other stage after it. We call those events generally within the industry, and fires those back. So it stores that transaction ID and passes it back within the postback via something called a HTTPS GET request. Now, the challenge is all of these different tracking platforms that I mentioned, they all use different macros and parameters for different things. So I say tomato, you say tomato. I say value, you say revenue. And so what is quite a laborious process if you're an ad ops manager, or particularly if you're new in the industry, is saying, okay, what do you call this macro that I'm going to send to you? And then when you get that, you can pass it back and essentially kind of translate it. It is literally saying, what do you call a tomato? I call it a tomato. Great. Okay, let's just do that. And that's how all this data gets back. So that was really the idea behind setting up something called Mr. Postback, right? Very simple idea. And what do you actually need to build this kind of stuff, right? So the essentials. First of all, you need, I would suggest, a AI tool. I'm using ChatGPT Plus, $20 a month. And that is really essential. You need that to basically come up with ideas. You can use the agent mode to do research, which is actually amazing. Check that out. But you can also then start to structure, okay, now I've asked it to build me a site for friends, holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries, right? What you're going to do then, it's going to produce a bunch of code. Now, what do you do with that code and where does it live? And this is where this is real basic stuff. So if you're a developer, you would have switched off ages ago. If you're just getting into this is how it actually works underneath the bonnet. So first of all, ChatGPT can create code, right? Now you need to get it somewhere where you can write the code and organize what the site is going to look like. So that might be pages, it might be all kinds of things, indexes, it might be JavaScript files, all this kind of stuff. Think of it really as like the folder structure for all of your code. And I used Visual Studio Code, which is very good. And this is where you actually write the code. So you write the code on here. And then the next thing you need to do, and I knew about this, but didn't really know how it worked up until the start of this month, is something called GitHub. And GitHub is basically, think of it as like Dropbox for your code. You can write your code, and then what you do is you create repositories in GitHub, which are essentially sort of like folders or areas where the code lives, and you can push to GitHub. So you write the code, you then say, great, we're going to commit to GitHub, and that sends the code and information to GitHub. And what's clever about GitHub is there it lives, and that is basically after you've tested it on your what's called local environment. So you write the code, you see how it looks locally. ChatGPT takes you through all of this. You can then push to GitHub, and then you can basically share it in GitHub. So you can have these as public or private. You can create what's called branches in GitHub, where you've got your main site. Maybe you want to build a back end or something similar. You can branch off and build that all. And then the final part of this is you need to deploy the code. And deployment means basically take that code and push it out into the internet. And I'm using Vercel to do that. Again, it's very cheap, very effective. You can use Vercel, and that essentially now deploys the code. And these are the stages. So think of ChatGPT as the engine to write the code, to give you the ideas. Visual Studio Code is where you write and store that code to test locally. GitHub is where you push and commit to repositories that you've made, and then Vercel deploys your project out into the world. So it's kind of amazing. There's a ton you can do here. The tools that I used within this, and there's a bunch of them: Visual Studio Code, GitHub, Vercel, Lightshot, and in some ways, I would put Lightshot right at the front. This is just a screen grabber. And what you'll find is if you're a non-coder like me, you're kind of writing, and then you will input some code, you'll test it. It won't work. There'll be an error code. You can either copy that error code, or you can show ChatGPT exactly what it is that you're seeing. So whether it's your Visual Studio Code layout or something similar, your GitHub repositories, you can just say, hey, this is the screen, tell me what to do. And it does. It's amazing. And for a non-coder, like, you can write these prompts to say, Here is what I'm seeing. Give me the full code to replace this, and it just saves you a bunch of time. So what you'll find is you'll start building out these prompts to basically help you along with this. GoDaddy, that's for basically domains. So you need to buy a project, let's say for your anniversary, friends, reunited calendar or whatever, you'd need that URL. And then you've got things like Astro, which is a static framework for JavaScript and things like this. So you can add this. You can use, I'm using React as like a library for building components, the sort of the front end of the engine inside Mr. Postback. And then you've got things like fast API for Python and things like that. Postgres, SQL. This is like a very simple relational database. Databases can be like a very simple database, like this is a name of all the people in our class, for example. And in that database, you might have student name, student number, you might have email address, right? But a relationship database is where multiple databases can link and connect to each other. So you might have a teacher database, you might have a school database. And then what you can do is to write queries, SQL queries, to say, what class is Jane in and who is teaching that, and link the tables together and show and report on that. Then you've got something like a form spree, which is brilliant. You're collecting details, you're collecting signups to the beta, for example. This goes into a field, and now I can look at that and say, great, these are the signups. We need to prioritize those email addresses or whatever. And finally, and this is a non exhaustive list, something like Google Analytics is very useful as well. Again, it's free. You can go and find tutorials on this to basically track everything that you're doing. And of course, if you're in the affiliate space, don't forget to use UTM codes or affiliate links if you wish to do that. What else? Well, let's talk about Mr. Postback very briefly, because what is it, for example? And the idea really behind it is that placing and formatting postbacks should be easy, right? So if you're interested in signing up for the beta, there'll be a link at the end of this. And basically what you can do within that is there's a macro directory. Right now, there's about 600 odd different macros. You can copy these, you can search by macros, you can export. You'll never have to be, hey, what does Aphice call sub ID 1 versus Everflow's sub ID? This is all within the directory. It's very cool. You can do it. And then things like the real meat of it, the postback tester. And I'm just finishing this at the moment. Basically, this is going to be like a format tester where you can create a postback, fire it to the database, and it will return and check based on the parameters and give you an error message. That's essentially what Mr. Postback does. This really is to inspire you to build your own tool, whatever that is, and hopefully, yeah, it will be useful for you. Anyway, I hope that is useful, and I will see you on the next one.